Welcome to Exploring Reality Maybe, where we explore the intersection of science and mysticism with experts.
Today, we're joined by Josh Haynes, co-founder of Masawa Ventures, a mental health investment fund with a revolutionary approach to venture capital. Josh brings a unique perspective shaped by his journey from growing up on welfare in Roswell, New Mexico, to working in 36 countries as a Peace Corps volunteer and U.S. Foreign Service officer during the Obama administration. After moving to Berlin and confronting his own unresolved childhood trauma, Josh discovered his mission to address the global mental health crisis through innovative investments.
In our conversation, we explore how Masawa operates as a nurture capital company, not only funding mental health startups, but actively supporting the founders' well-being. We discussed their portfolio companies tackling everything from dementia prevention to workplace mental health, the intersection of AI and mental health technology, and Josh's provocative view that mental health investment is actually climate and defense investment in disguise. We also dive into the role of the ego in both the personal healing and global crisis, and how Masawa's unique profit-sharing model is reimagining what ethical capitalism can look like. So Josh, welcome. You've had a long career designing solutions across industries, man. Can you share your background and personal journey with mental health that led you to create Masawa?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jody and David. It's super great to be here. So, I come from the United States originally. I was raised in New Mexico in a small town that many people know called Roswell. And I was maybe fortunate to be raised by a single mom on welfare, and to be gifted academically, and was able to get out of the catch-22 that is poverty in the United States, and had an illustrious career in technology, traveling around the world. I was a Peace Corps volunteer as well in Morocco. I spent a number of years in other places like Niger, Mozambique, Haiti, always looking at technology as a catalyst for change. And I felt at some point during grad school that I could be doing a lot more with my tech skills. With having lived in so many countries and speaking a number of languages, that I figured out a way to become a diplomat or a foreign service officer at USAID in the Obama administration.
Oh, wow.
That was a great experience. 7 years I was there, and I saw instinctively when I went to USAID that there was a mismatch in terms of how things were done versus the outcomes that people were looking for. Unfortunately, it was a very linear process. There was an RFP, a whole bunch of big firms apply for these projects, and they implement them, and then there's lots of reporting, and objective 1.1 is met, yes or no. And I felt that it wasn't really getting back to first principles and thinking about, well, who are the ultimate beneficiaries and the people who already have knowledge on the ground who need to be in these rooms deciding what programs need to happen. So somehow I found the right people in the agency and in the White House to be able to then create a more ecosystem approach. Meaning, we were able to do a number of series of civil society innovation rounds where people were coming together, nonprofit, for-profit, tech, not tech, coming together and saying, well, what can we do together if we have a little bit of funding? And we had the funding. We partnered with groups like the Aga Khan Foundation, OSF, the Swedish government. And it was an exciting time to innovate not only on how we were addressing some of these big issues in emerging markets in developing countries, but also interesting how we could use different types of capital as well. Fast forward, my husband and I decided we wanted to raise our kids in Europe, in Berlin specifically. And when we got to Berlin, I had my own run-in with mental health. I had never dealt with that childhood trauma that I had from having such a rough upbringing. And at once I felt I was useless. It didn't matter that I'd worked in 36 countries or spoke 7 languages. And saw at once that also mental health was not something that I had ever thought as important as it really was, not only for myself, but everybody else. I mean, tell me someone you don't know, Jody and David, who doesn't have a parent that has Alzheimer's, who doesn't have a child who's neurodiverse, who hasn't had suicide in their family, who hasn't had, the list goes on and on and on. And it's very clear that mental health affects so many people. In fact, it affects everyone. And if you think about the money, the capital, and the types of capital that are going to mental health, well, we can get into those numbers maybe later. But I saw that there was an opportunity for investing in early stage technologies that were focused on profit-oriented endeavors, because that's really where we're going to make the biggest dent in the mental health crisis. Philanthropy is important. Research is utterly important. The public sector funding is important, but there's a sweet spot of being able to get capital to address this huge mental health crisis.
So let's get into some of the solutions you've chosen to fund. So this
Sure.
is a big problem. 1 in 5 people will develop a mental health condition in their lifetime.
Yeah.
We've all heard, loneliness is on the rise, especially
Mm.
among young people.
Yeah.
Mental health costs society billions each year. So, given this sort of backdrop and these staggering figures, tell us about the thesis behind Masawa and some of the early solutions
Sure.
you chose to fund.
Yeah, absolutely. So our thesis is looking at what we're investing in and also how we're investing. So the what we're investing in is product or founders who are developing companies whose users at the end of the day will have improved mental health and well-being. So we're a mental health outcomes fund. So that means that we're investing in things ranging from mental illness. So looking at topics around schizophrenia and eating disorders, but also the systems, making sure that we're improving access to and efficiency of the delivery of care, not only for the patients, but their families and their caregivers and the doctors, staff, et cetera. But we're also looking at neurodiversity, the rise of ADHD, for example, of course. In my family, two of the four of us are dyslexic, and of course that provides an interesting opportunity. But we're also looking at mental wellness because where you work has an effect on your mental health. Right? Your age, right? We're looking at elder care, or we're also looking at youth, especially when you lay over the role of technology, social media, and AI. There's a lot of danger, but there's also, on the flip side, a lot of technologies that we're looking at to help ensure that our mental health isn't becoming even more degraded with these technological innovations. And we also realize, though, that there's the social or adjacent determinants of mental health. And so we're looking at nutrition. We're looking at the gut-to-brain barrier, the gut-brain connection is huge. Metabolic psychiatry is on the rise, and the research is now coming out with some extraordinary data. I'm sure as a brain guy yourself, you certainly understand the importance of the guts in that equation. But we're also looking at financial wellness, especially for people from traditionally marginalized populations, all the way out to climate anxiety and AI anxiety. We haven't seen those companies yet, but we're certainly looking at it because mental health is multivariate and 360-degree. It affects us in a very holistic and 360-degree manner. So there are questions of the companies that we've backed. So far in our portfolio, we have 3 companies, and we've had 1 exit. One of the companies focuses on employee well-being. So looking at the fact you spend most of your life at work, most people do, and not taking it from the traditional EAP system where it's an add-on, an app that you can get from HR. That doesn't really work, we found, and we know the market is quite crowded. This technology from a company called Quan is able to help teams understand how they work together and then use validated evidence and data to produce rituals, concrete rituals for a set group of people, and then allow the HR backend to be able to understand what's the performance, how is burnout, how are people doing, both on the leadership side, but also on the overall mental health side. Another company we invested in is focused on dementia, how making sure that you have an idea of what's the likelihood of you getting dementia, given a whole number of factors, and then having a coach by your side to be able to help you extend those lives. This is a company that is not only, B2C, but it's focusing on selling to insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies because there are big costs associated with not only the clinical trials for dementia and Alzheimer's medicine, but also for reducing the overall cost as someone progresses in the disease. And then we've just invested in a really exciting company in Finland called Scion Games, that is a gaming studio for health games. So they've developed games to help the overall marketing and awareness of various health topics. They started with COVID and vaccine, partnering with the WHO, but they're also developing or have developed with a pharmaceutical client as ADHD game to help caregivers and individuals understand what it's like to have ADHD specifically, and that's in a number of markets. And this company is a platform play because they can develop and are working on games in the areas of obesity, general depression, psychedelics, and we see it as really a nice Trojan horse for helping people use gaming. Most of the world are gamers anyways, using things that are already in their hands to be able to get more information about mental health and other health areas related as well.
Well,
So
yeah, that's what a beautiful start to your portfolio.
yeah,
Incredible.
we're very proud of that. And if you look at not only we think as an investment fund, it's important, yes, that we're getting capital to these founders so that they can grow their businesses and grow their impact. That's a no-brainer. But we also have identified another area that's really crucial for the success of the portfolio and the impact, and that's the founder well-being. And we liken ourselves not to traditional venture capitalists, but we're nurture capitalists. So we have an entire program called Nurture Capital that really takes a hard look of what is the founder's raison d'etre? Why are they doing what they're doing? What trauma haven't they dealt with? Where can they even become better leaders? And then we provide services from our own management fee for the period of a year to help match and get them in the right footing, especially as we're investing in primarily seed stage companies. We've also in the back end innovated on the structure of the fund to be able to be more aligned with what's the purpose of capital and knowing what's enough.
Oh my God, Josh, that's incredible. You know, as a early member of Social Venture Network, we had a gathering for founders who had experienced hostile takeover attempts
Mm,
or attempts to push them out of their company because they weren't quote unquote qualified
yeah, yeah,
to scale their company. And we thought we'd have 4 or 5 people show up in the room. We had 25.
yeah,
25.
yep.
And so a colleague of mine now is writing a book. We actually have a whole procedure to help founders with a 1-year strategy to help them if they need to
Mm,
step out of the company.
that's
But
beautiful.
I'm thinking about, your experience, your own personal experience as a man with mental health. And of course, Sean Lesser has men now walking around the
Mm,
globe with the real mental health project.
mm,
And I'm touched by your own personal experience with mental health. And, you know, it's fascinating. Sometimes we take what the thing that challenges us and then we can transform it into an incredible offering
sure,
to the world. And
sure.
I feel like you're doing that. I was wondering, like, as a founder, like when you moved to Berlin and as a man, experienced burnout,
Mm,
when did you realize that you really wanted to take that personal experience and
yeah,
turn it into this?
yeah. It was more of an aha moment.
Mm.
When you're in the doldrums, we had 2 young kids, and I wasn't feeling well, and I was, what am I doing? I've done all these things in my life, all these accolades that I've been seeking that attention and the affirmation because I didn't have it as a child, and so I stopped that out in my adult, and I had reached, to some extent. And it was just more of, a bit really listening to synchronicity, what's happening, listening to various podcasts or messages, and it fit together. And as not, as you know, from my background, I don't have a traditional finance background, and so realized that I wasn't going to be able to do this alone. Sure, I had an idea, and I can learn lots from Google on how to spell VC, but I was also very fortunate about 3 years ago to meet my now co-founding partner, Sabine Flechier, who does have an incredible experience. And she had her own portfolio of 70 companies during COVID, where she was having to be the coach and realizing that, wait, I need a lot more help here because I don't know, I'm not trained in this per se. And so that's kind of both of her professional and my personal backgrounds coming together and saying, well, we need to be able to invest in and via a mental health lens.
So there's this growing idea that mental health might be connected to how our brains process energy. I know this is something that
Mhm.
Masawa has
Sure.
written, as I understand it, linking things like depression and anxiety to physical conditions such as
Mhm.
obesity and diabetes and things like that. How the brain is sort of processing the energy that it gets from the body.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that connection, and how does
Yeah.
it look at how does it influence how you look at solutions?
Yeah. So there's a number of elements. There's the scientific side. Is it actually valid? Right? Is it a company that's looking at harnessing the energy that the mitochondria, the powerhouse of our cells, is using in what, for example, if we're looking at metabolic psychiatry? looking at glucose versus ketones versus, what is being processed and how is that the whole chemical um, transfer or bonds being created to create that energy. So that what we are interested in is also the outcomes. So if it's a company that's focused on anxiety or depression, specifically, what is it? Is it just a behavior change app? Just in inverted commas, say in English. Sorry. And so, but we also have to look at the financial viability. Right? Will this company be able to find buyers? And for us, we focus primarily on B2B and B2B2C companies. Because especially in the behavior change world, B2C is very difficult. We find you can get up to 50, 100,000 users, but after that, it's really hard to maintain when you can't just vibe market anymore or vibe growth anymore. And so there has to be some type of inroad in ideally multiple plans of how to make be reimbursed or be paid for the services that you're providing. And so, yes, that's a quick answer.
Yeah, yeah, no, interesting. So let's segue to the digital health marketplace
Sure.
broadly and sort of the financial landscape. So it's projected to be, I'm seeing figures like $60 billion by 2030. Um,
Digital mental health or digital health writ large? Because I think,
digital mental health.
okay, good.
So
Yeah.
does it, yeah, 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 digital mental health marketplace, right, 60
Yeah,
billion. And
indeed.
of course, AI solutions are leading innovations in diagnostics, therapy delivery, and clinical workflows. So, but there's also, concerns, right? There's also, let's talk about some of the concerns, pushback against marketing AI as therapists, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge thing you see in the news and lots of concern about that. A lot of risks around data privacy,
Mm-hmm.
clinical validation, fragmented
Mm-hmm.
health systems. I mean, there's
Yeah,
a lot of, so
it's a lot.
we got this big draw, but there's also all of these, potential concerns. So how do you
Yeah,
evaluate the opportunities
sure.
and weigh them against the
Yeah.
risks in your business?
Yeah. Um, it's as many people now know, companionship is the number one use case for ChatGPT and Claude. And so, as a system built on LLMs that only have a certain amount of tokens, a window that's only so big, it can forget relatively quickly. It's of course very worrisome. Now, we've seen dozens and dozens of companies that are trying to address that specifically, and so being able to use a clinically validated LLMs, which is that's still a newer thing that is coming onto the market, but being able to use that to provide assistance. We or I fundamentally believe that there needs to be a human involved. But there's a number of things that still AI isn't yet able to pick up, especially nuance on tone and voice is getting there, but on overall being able to wade through a lot of frankly, the BS that a lot of humans who have a number of mental health issues are able to put up in front of them to make sure that people know that, oh, I'm actually okay when I'm not really okay. And so the applications that I'm most excited about still have the human in the loop, and there's a number of different ways that that can be done. But I'm also excited about using AI for a lot of the non-clinical work. So a lot of the, yes, describing, but also providing information on at least the administrative burden that exists in the healthcare systems. Right? Because I think in your question, there's a couple of different layers. There's the entire healthcare system that's broken. In the United States, it's broken. In Europe, it's fractured. It's incredibly difficult to be able to get around, and so AI can help on that a lot. But also the delivery of services. There's a third element that I would also mention is that especially because people and increasingly youth are spending so much time online and having their entire communities online, there are ways, and we're seeing technologies using AI and natural language processing, et cetera, to be able to mitigate bullying online or to de-escalate suicidal ideation. And so there's some of these innovations that are coming up to address the specific harms that these technologies are creating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course, our friend Jen Libby has Promly, which
Indeed.
is a private platform for high school kids
Mhm.
where the AI can track words that can cause potential problems and
Yeah.
also offer these kids a safe place with psychologists involved
Mhm.
to go to prom, to graduate, to interact with each other. So there's really wonderful technologies that are being developed in this regard.
Yeah.
And of course, as you said, we've heard about the challenges with kids learning how to commit suicide using
Mhm.
Chat GPT or an
Mhm.
app. And so, these real important clinical guardrails
Mhm.
uh, over the unchecked growth of technology, and how to protect youth and human oversight as it relates to AI and how it's used, and
Mhm.
also evidence-based tools like you're talking about are sort of essential. And so, are you involved in like the policy or regulatory
Mhm.
area that addresses or explores how to mitigate risk
Yeah.
uh, at the intersection of AI and mental health?
It's a increasingly important topic. As a small fund, we're also currently fundraising as well to finish out raising this fund so we can invest in a number of these solutions and opportunities. We're not directly involved, but as part of our due diligence, we check very closely to the extent to the additionality that we're able to provide because we know a lot of these circles both in Europe and in the United States on the policy side. But to the extent that the companies themselves are using the data that they're generating to help change policy, not necessarily directly, but also oftentimes indirectly. The dementia company, for example, that we looked at, the mild cognitive impairment specifically company, is working with a number of different policy groups on as from the private sector to be able to chime in and say, well, we also need to make sure that there's a regulatory environment that enables easy licensing or being able to easy reimbursement. Digital reimbursement or reimbursement for digital prescriptions is still something that happens very, very rarely. It's only two countries in Europe, so Germany and now France, have it, but it's also very, very early. And of course, we know the issues in the United States as well. And so, indirectly, the answer to your question is yes, but not directly.
Mhm.
So going back to my
Yeah,
question and your answers, and so what I'm seeing is you're taking these guardrails and these risks and you're turning them into opportunity, right?
absolutely.
In other words, that's
We
where
have
you're
to.
sitting. You're sitting at this space where, there's this AI boom and this digital technology boom in the
Yep.
mental health space, and it's creating all these risks, and you're trying to play in the space to sort of keep it safe and keep it consistent with regulations.
Most certainly, because it's not going away, and we can't regulate stopping it. One of the first questions we ask in some of these
Right.
AI companies that come to us, well, how are you? What about the switching costs? Everybody already has ChatGPT or Claude or Grok or whatever on their phone, and it's just what they go to. And so, how can you pull people's eyes to your product because you're licensed? Well, how many how many people
Right.
actually care?
Right.
So, that's also a lot of times why we're looking at the B2B side, because being able to get some of these technologies on platforms that already exist, that are already part of big corporations, for example, or already in with pharmaceuticals or insurance companies, is actually a more interesting go to market.
Oh yeah. I mean, you need millions of dollars to market a new app, a new product.
Indeed.
So it really makes great sense. And I'm excited for these products these companies that you've invested in, and can't
Mhm.
wait to see how they grow. We always ask our guests to explore what the ego might be as it relates to
Mm,
the work that they do. And so I wanted to really bring this up with you, the mind, intellect, and ego,
yeah,
and how you think using these technologies addresses how the mind responds and what you think the ego might be, and can some of these technologies sort of be a solution to calming a overactive ego, those kind of explorations.
sure. I think the answer is yes, eventually. But there has to first be the volition, the willingness to say, "Oh, wait, my relationship to my ego is something that is actually detrimental. in the grander scheme of things. Yes, of course, having a strong and important relationship with your ego is crucial for asserting yourself and making sure that dreams and visions are realized, but also can bring down an empire. I say, as a quick aside, we oftentimes in the impact investing world, most of the capital is going to climate. And now we're seeing a lot more capital being diverted to defense. And I say that Masawa is not only a mental health fund, we're also a climate fund, because it's the humans and our own egos and our inabilities to understand that relationship between us and nature that's causing the problems. We're also a defense fund. We're a natural defense fund, because if most of the leaders in the world that are wreaking so much of the havoc that's happening in our societies had dealt with their own childhood traumas or their own psychological states healthily, then we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. And so I think ego, it plays such a crucial role in all of this. I think there's the precursor, so those are our parents, how we're raised by our parents in our society. I think it's no shock in a very capitalistic zero-sum game society that I would unfortunately ascribe the U.S. and most of Western countries to this idea of ego, where I am the one who has to it's me and me alone. All of my success doesn't come from the generations and generations of people before me and everyone around me now. I think it doesn't help to make our case. Now, I have seen that there has been an increase in the number of technologies and communities around spirituality. So non-organized religion spirituality, which of course looks at that question of what is my role as an individual in this larger universe, and what can I do accordingly. And so there are technologies coming out to being able to look at different energies, for example, and so I don't have a specific company in mind for this question around ego, but I think at the end of the day, it's all about the humans. There's a reason the word Masawa comes from the Arabic word for equality, al-Musawa. And if we are all able to have our own mental health and kind of put ourselves in perspective and manage that ego-id balance, then we are all a bit more equal.
So it occurs to me as you're giving your answer to that question, and we get this, as Jody said, we ask all our guests this question, and it's really fascinating to hear different perspectives, right? But as you were talking, I was thinking, the holy grail of digital apps, I suppose, would be an app that helped to make the ego completely apparent, right, to the user, right? I mean, in ways, that's what we're trying to get at, I suppose. And if a user could become familiar with his or her own ego, right? That would almost be everything.
Yeah, familiar knowing, but also, again, what's the conditioning that it's okay.
Right, absolutely.
A previous, if you were someone who was a previous alpha male or alpha female,
Yep.
growing in your wisdom and realizing, oh wait, it's not always about me all the time.
Right.
Making sure that we know it's okay to deal with this, and to lead with humility and with vulnerability, which is really a key foundational input to our nurture capital program. Yeah, because
so let
founders,
us know.
yeah.
So let us know when you're funding that one, and Jody and I will,
Exactly.
Jody and I will
Sounds
buy
good.
it.
Yeah, I think they in the mental health diagnostic world, they describe narcissism as a ailment that's really hard to treat, because the person doesn't have the ability to have a sense of themselves in relationship to the other.
That's true.
And so it's an ailment, and I don't know what kind of medications or treatments or plant medicine can address that, but I have so much compassion for a person who suffers from that, because
Sure.
there's really no way out unless they have some revelation about it.
Yep. No,
So,
agree.
Josh, what's next for you and Masawa? Like what are you excited about? Is there anything you want to ask or share with our audience that could
Sure.
be helpful? And what's the next thing?
Yeah, certainly. Super. So I think our goal at Masawa is to, if we look at this, the role of capital traditionally, let's say the last 20 years, especially looking at venture capital or private equity, and that we've moved into ESG investing or impact investing, we're really trying to push the bounds of what can be done and what should be done with respect to the role of capital, because capital, of course, is just one form of power, which is another form of energy. And we have this unique kind of structure that I mentioned before, where we're giving 10% of the profit from the fund to the founders. We're doing a profit share, a
Amazing.
solidarity capital. And we also know what's enough for us. We don't need any more yachts. We have zero. Yachts take a lot of management, I understand. And so there's a maximum amount of money that we can actually make at the fund, and anything above that amount goes into a foundation that we as a community run. And so what we're working to do is to continue to invest in companies. We're actively raising from investors as well. Lots of different types. We have institutional investors on board, large foundations are on board, family offices, individuals, to be able to also prove this hypothesis that a nurture capital approach is actually one that results in better outcomes on the impact side, but also on the financial side, because founders aren't burning out as much. Because, of course, we know if founders are burning out, and you alluded to this before, then they're putting the business and the impact at risk. And of course, toxic work environments, most people have worked in such environments. And so that's what we're looking to prove out with this nurture capital approach. And I think kind of as an orthogonal approach, we're also kind of doubling down and saying, no, mental health is an asset class that we should be putting more private capital into, because the costs are so hard and that gap is so huge, right? David, you cited at the top of the show some figures around that, and there's at least a $250 billion gap in the mental health opportunities. Because I think COVID has allowed us to speak more about it, and then we see how it's affecting all of us, and we're at a tipping point. But really figuring out how do we channel more capital, not into just we're a small fund, but into lots of different types of asset classes, so we can really get to the first principles and core of why all these crises that we're having in this world, where are they stemming from? And I firmly believe it's because of the behavioral crisis or the human crisis.
Incredible. Your model is so innovative to have some of your profits go back to your companies you've invested in, to support the founder themselves with their own journey. Like, what a gorgeous structure for a fund. I really want to personally congratulate you on that. I hope it becomes a model for other funds and funders of companies. So, Josh, thank you so much. We will share your link and any articles or anything you want to share on our show notes. And it's just been a privilege to be with you. I will see you next week at the Real Mental Health Summit. And look forward to continuing this conversation and waiting for that technology that can address the ego. So
sounds good.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.
Now this is cool. The music you have been listening to is actually my consciousness in motion. To create this hypnotic music, Marsha Britskaya of Nextvox and her team connected musical notes to the frequency of my brainwaves from gamma to delta. The team at Nextvox will be exploring how listening to your own brainwaves can provide health benefits, from reducing your blood pressure to calming anxiety. Visit our show notes to learn more about Nextvox.
Exploring Reality Maybe is written, produced, fact-checked, and edited by Jody R. Weiss and David Schwartz. Research support is provided by Semicolon Connects. Music produced by Nextvox. Visit our website at exploringrealitymaybe.org to find show notes, transcripts, bios, and to learn more. If you like the show, please visit our website to donate.